Hello, this is show number 2 of the Northmont TV, a show about people and places here in the Northmont area, and I'm your host, Lee Kreider. I got some very nice feedback out of the first show. Some of you are interested. We're looking for interesting people to talk to, and we have a very interesting one we're going to talk to today. But you will notice at the bottom here we have a web domain now, northmonttv.com. We invite you to visit it. It's not much there now, but we hope this will grow as those of you out there give me ideas of people you think have a story to tell. And boy, have we got a story for you. I had a very pleasant visit with a person who's become a friend of mine because she's a friend of my wife, Jean Terrell McCreery, who was a women's Air Force service pilot during World War II. These women, so underappreciated and almost unknown, flew every combat aircraft the Air Force and the Navy had during World War II. They did not fly them in combat, but they did ferry missions, transport missions, and everything else, and did this almost without recognition, and only recently have they been receiving the recognition they deserve. This show's going to run a little longer than what I intend most shows to run, but Jean has so many wonderful stories to tell and is such a delightful person. I just couldn't cut a lot of this out. So let's get right on with Jean McCreery, a WASP, Women's Air Force Service Pilot.
When the war started, everybody wanted to do something.
Yeah.
And I graduated in 1942, the beginning of the war, and a year later, 8 of my classmates were dead. They were kids. I don't even want to start on that. But everybody, they said the United States was weak, we couldn't fight or anything else, but everybody immediately enlisted. Everybody we knew, stopped school, everything. And I went to work, and I went 1 year Ohio U from right out of high school, and I saw an article in Life magazine, which that's how most of us learned about it, of a training school for women pilots. It was an experimental group. I read about the article about the WASP, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to fly. So I was working at Waco. My dad, of course, my mother didn't want me to do it.
Now, Waco was
Actually, Waco stands for Western Air Company, and it was out of northeastern Ohio, but it moved here and built Wacos. Wacos are still
Waco
flying.
airplanes. I believe they also built gliders, didn't they, during the war?
That's what I did. I never wanted to do home ec. I really wasn't.
You weren't the home ec type?
No. So I took every art class I could take to get out of taking home ec, and I ran out of them by the time I was a senior, so I took mechanical drawing, which led me to drafting. And when the war started, they needed draftsmen at Waco. So they took the 4 best grades, 3 guys and me, and we went to work in the last half of the school year. And my senior year, I went to school half-time, worked the rest of the time. And the guys in the office were taking flying lessons in Greenville, and I wanted to go. And they said, no, you talk too much. And I said, I won't talk, I'll shut up.
Okay.
That was very difficult. So we would ride over, and I wouldn't say a damn word all the way over there. And then I'd wait all day till I get a chance to get some dual time. And of course, I was 19 or 18, whatever. And the guy that owned the airport was, well, we won't get into his description. However, I go up in the plane with him for the first ride, and he's tried to make a pass at me. And I said, how would you like me to fly your plane right into the ground? And he got completely away from me, got me on the ground, and made me fly with somebody else. He wouldn't go up with me after that. And there was a farmer, Frosty, and he was strictly a farmer. He wore jeans, and we went out and checked his cows, we checked his corn, and we did all his farming from the air, and he taught me to fly. And I got 6 hours in, and he said, okay, you do it. And I said, oh. But I did it. And
so you soloed then at 6 hours?
yeah, but that's typical of some small lightweight plane. And I had to get, you had to have, I think, 35 hours or maybe 50 to get a pilot's license. And I wasn't old enough for the WASP then. They wanted people with, how old they wanted them? 21 or something, but I simply wasn't old enough. And they started dropping the age limit, and I thought, I'll get a license, I'll get in. So I got my pilot's license in Greenville. I took the test in Dayton, and the other time that the owner of the place rode with me, he had to ride with me before I could go down and take the test. He says, you'll probably flunk, but you can take it, I guess. Well, I didn't flunk. Don't tell me I can't do something. Just don't.
Okay, I'm not going to.
I got my license and I applied, and they sent me for an interview. Now remember, I'm a kid. I'm right out of high school, and I think I know everything, and I know nothing.
Okay.
And they sent me to...
We've all been there.
I hope so. Anyway, I went to Cleveland for an interview, and one of the women, they had 3 or 4 women in charge of this thing, and it was an experimental program to see if women could fly, to take the dirty flying. In other words, planes from here to there, towing targets, all that kind of stuff, so that the men could do combat. And they were looking for a limited number of people, and they probably saw me as a kid they could handle. And they could, because I did exactly what they told me to do, because I didn't want to wash out. Anyway, we go for this interview, and my mother was still against it, but all she could talk about, we went in the elevator up in the hotel, this lady's room, to talk with me, and Boris Karloff was in the elevator. And my mother was so shocked at that, when she didn't say anything, and we got out of the elevator, she said, Boris Karloff was in the elevator. So that's pretty much what I remember about the interview. I was interviewed in the fall, and I actually made the last class, because it was before Congress to make us military, and they didn't want us to fly their airplanes. The war started going better, and the guys started coming home, and they didn't want to go in the walking army. They wanted to keep flying. So get rid of these women. They're flying our planes. Well, we were good, and we had a good record. We flew 60 million miles. We flew a better record than they did. 38 women were killed without any kind of recognition.
So you were not in the military?
No, not then. We flew civil service. But we still flew military aircraft, and we had military training, just the same as any other cadet. But you know, this is the same thing as the young people have today. I'm just a young kid, but that I had maybe 50, 60 hours, and they were trying to prove if they could run a school and teach women. Believe me, they didn't think women could last 24 hours flying an airplane or any other length of time. They had some of the silliest. You had to take 10 days off, I think, if you were menstruating, because it wasn't safe. Now you tell me the sense to that. It was all that kind of hooey. So, and they didn't let anybody come and talk to us. We were pretty much
Now, where was this at? Where you training?
I was in Sweetwater, Texas.
Sweetwater, Texas.
The armpit of Texas, really. And there's a museum there now. I've gone back the last couple of years. In May we go back. So they're restoring one of the hangars, and we still draw a crowd. There's less than 100 of us still alive.
Now, Gene, I have a photograph, your portrait, and I think I gave you a copy of this.
Yeah.
And people are going to see it right now on the screen.
That's good.
And when I look at you, I said, did you get lots of dates when you were down there?
We weren't allowed to date. They kept us locked up.
Locked up?
Well, we couldn't. The nearest military base was Big Springs, and after about a month, they let us go over there for a dance. But we weren't allowed to date instructors. You could get fired for that, because they still could fire you. It was civil service. And anybody that really wanted to do what we went for, we got through. It was tough. The training was really tough.
Now, you told me something about the guys trying to see you by having engine trouble, and
then one of them was killed. The girl was from a wealthy family in Tennessee, and she was flying in Pearl Harbor the day they bombed Pearl Harbor. She was teaching a student, and she immediately got to the ground, got the student out of the way, and went home and enlisted. Her father had made her brothers promise they wouldn't go in. The Air Corps was iffy. Remember, this was 1943, and people had only been flying for 20-some years. And he didn't want his kids flying, so he made them promise they wouldn't, but he didn't make her promise. So she gets in, she's got a lot of time, she's very talented, and she's one of the first girls. I went in as a cadet, because the woman said, I can teach women as well as men. And that's pretty clear to us now, but it wasn't then. We were pretty well restricted. We could have dates, but not go anyplace overnight or any of that kind of stuff. And we weren't smart enough, and besides, I was too tired. They worked us from morning till night. And we had the same cadet training, with the exception of, and we didn't have any combat training. Because in the beginning, all they wanted us to do was they built airplanes in California, and they wanted them in New York. Well, then, so they got to fly them there. Then they wanted the planes that are in New York back in California. So our government at its best, that's what they did. They needed somebody to do that. Then
transport vehicles.
Yeah, and then they decided that maybe we could tow targets. Okay, you got some kid from some hillbilly was good with a gun, and he's got to practice, and you're towing a target, and that target is right back there. And they came back with some holes in their planes, too. They didn't get killed, but anyway, 38 women were killed. This one I was telling you about, this guy wants to see what a woman looks like flying a plane. He gets too close to her and it clipped her wing, and she was too low to get out. She couldn't make it. And she went in, she was killed. And planes then were iffy. Yeah. No kidding.
Well, Gene, now you say 38 were killed?
Yeah.
And what happened after someone was killed?
Well, they'd have an investigation, but we didn't get a flag. Nobody had any kind of a military service.
And they didn't pay for their transport?
No, they didn't pay for their casket or anything else. We either took up a collection to send them home, or their families came and got them. I mean, we were treated like women doing a man's job that he didn't want to let them do, period. There's just nothing else but that.
Okay.
And because they did it that way, we had to be better. Everything they did, we had to be able to do better, and we could.
Kind of like Ginger Rogers said about Fred Astaire, you remember that?
Yeah, I do everything he does backwards.
And in high heels.
Yeah. Believe me, I know the feeling, because I've had more than one man say, well, you probably can't. You're rough on the controls, or you're this, or you're that. But I still could do everything they told me to do, because I wanted to fly. Now it's so common, you don't think of it that way, but it wasn't common. And women were to get married and have children and stay home. Well,
Gene, you once told me a story about losing your map.
Well, yeah. We started out flying a biplane, which is open cockpit, which is why I say I can't hear anymore. But we went from that to the AT-6, which is a closed cockpit, and by then we were making cross-country traveling trips, and we had maps. Well, you can sit up in that AT-6, it's just like your living room, and read your map and see where you're going. But we had to make a trip in a PT, a open cockpit. So I get all in this big, heavy flight suit, and we get up, get to our altitude, and I'm supposed to go from Sweetwater to Houston. And I'm all set, I'm in the right direction, and I pull my map out to read it. Where do you think it went? Out the window. So there I am over Texas, and I don't have the faintest damned idea where Houston is. But it's funny, my dad was always interested in railroads. And he said in Texas, all railroads lead to Houston. It might not anymore, but at that time, I thought I'd find me a railroad. So I found some tracks and followed them, and pretty soon I saw other planes from our unit, and I followed them in, and I didn't tell anybody I was lost, or how stupid I was. It was an unreal lifetime. It was taking a sheltered girl and sticking her out in the, in the wild, woolly West.
So now you were 19 when you started.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
93.
93.
Yeah, I'll be 93 in April.
Okay.
And I'm the second youngest. So they're all older than I am. There were one or two younger than me, but not many. And I was the baby, and they treated me like that. And they said, do this and do that, and I did this and did that. I minded because I wanted to get my wings, and I got them. I got them from General Arnold.
Hap Arnold.
Yeah. The last graduation was our class because, okay, go a little bit. They wanted to make women's branch of the Air Force. That went over like a lead balloon. Nobody wanted that. And Congress didn't want it. They weren't going to pay for it. But it kept going before Congress and kept hanging up. And finally, it went down by 2 votes. And there's a lot of reasons that I've known since, but nevertheless, it went down, so they said, no, we're not going to have women in the Air Force. And they said, okay, then we're shutting it down, which took all the utility flying we were doing. You couldn't do it. Then they had to do it themselves. And then they complained because they didn't have enough pilots. And all of us were marriage age. All we wanted to do was get married and have kids, being the natural sequence of things. And we all went home, had families. And in the 70s, the government announced that for the first time, women were going to fly military aircraft. And we said maybe, but it's not the first time. And because we had done our family duties, and I didn't do this, I was still raising kids. I had 10 children, I told you that.
Yeah.
Some of the more influential women went to D.C. and they lobbied Congress and finally got recognition as pilots and as military pilots. We got veteran status, which made a big difference. It makes a difference because it's helped pay for me.
I believe that was done under the Carter.
Yeah,
Jimmy Carter
and somebody
president.
went in to see him. The girls dressed up and went in to visit congressmen and the president. And he said, why aren't you home keeping house? Not to me, but to one of the other girls. And so he was really in favor of it, too. They just didn't want women to play with their airplanes. They still don't. And every step a woman takes, she's fighting a bunch of guys that, you can't play with my toys. Not my airplane.
Now, I believe you women flew about everything they had going, didn't you?
Absolutely. Everything they had, and twice as good. And but under the handicap that, they didn't tell you everything you're supposed to know.
Well, I remember reading some women were given an assignment to fly an aircraft they never really had been checked out on.
Oh, well, that happened a lot because if you were ferrying planes back and forth, they'd just bring a plane out and let you go up a couple times and say, take it to New York. And of course, the women had enough flying time. I mean, it's like a car. There's Cadillacs and then there's Fords. But they didn't have, well, they had some pretty sophisticated airplanes. I did see a woman fly a jet out of Dayton. We flew everything the military had. I didn't fly a jet. But
I believe you saw a jet very early on, didn't you? Tell me about that.
Well, I flew into Tucson, and we stayed there for a couple of hours to pick up some planes. And I go out to get ready to take off, and the tower said to hold my position. So I just held my position. And this little old plane comes out and goes past me and turns around to take off. And it was military, and I thought, okay, he comes first. And he went straight up, like this. And I thought, he is going to stall out, he's going to die. It was a jet.
Uh-huh.
And of course, their takeoff is entirely different. But I didn't know that. I didn't know what a jet was.
You'd never seen one before?
Nope, that's the first place I ever saw one. Nobody'd seen them. Now, they had a couple right pat. and they were using them, but not in combat, not at that time. But then there's a lot of utility flying, just like that towing targets business, and flying radio checks, and that was my other piece of excitement. I took a plane up just to check that the radio had been installed and was working right. And I looked out and the plane was on fire. I saw fire around the front end. In the first place, they gave us instructions on parachutes, how to jump. Now that amounted to a man standing up on a platform with a parachute in front of him. He says, now, if you have to jump out of the plane, you hold on to this thing and you count to 10 and then you pull it. And we said, oh yeah? Now, he didn't pull it. He just said he'd pull it. I mean, I'd seen parachutes. I knew what they were. But we went back and we said, you got enough nerve to do that? Come on, I'd never done it. And so we talked about that all the time. And believe me, when I saw that plane on fire, I had all the nerve in the world. I unbuckled my seatbelt, stood up, I had a chute on, and I was ready to jump. And I looked out and I saw houses. I thought, what's going to happen to this plane if I jump, if I leave it? And I thought I'd hit one of those houses and I'd be in worse trouble than I am right now. So I sat back down and I put the plane in a dive and pulled it up, which put the fire out. And I was less than 10 minutes from the field, so I went right back. Now what I did wrong was I didn't tell anybody, because I didn't want them to think it was my fault it caught fire. Why would I think that? Because everything's your fault if you're doing something they don't want you to do.
Right.
So, but it was just a little engine fire, and they got it cleared up, I hope. But anyway, I didn't tell anybody. But I'd jump if I had to.
There's a wonderful story I read about, and I think you reminded me of it, of Paul Tibbets having trouble convincing pilots to take on the B-29.
Well, the B-29 was a big Glory airplane, the one that they were going to use to bomb Tokyo. And you had to make test flights in it. You had to teach people to fly it. So they were taken around from base to base, and they put a crew of women on it out of Columbus, because it was coming out of Columbus. And the other pilots were officers, or maybe not pilots, said, now what are you going to do about these women? Are you going to teach them something? And Tibbets said, they can teach, they know more than you think they do. And he never told them to do anything. They sat down and flew it. Every plane has a series of checklists that you go over before you start it, and you find out how fast it takes off, and you know what the plane will do before you get into it. If you
Some men didn't want to fly it.
No, they said it was a killer aircraft. So here comes this plane landing in a base, and 3 women get out. And the guys, oh
Guess
well.
I better fly it, huh?
Oh well. I mean, today it sounds ridiculous, because women are doing everything. In fact, I think they're doing too much. We're showing them our secrets, and that's crazy. If I have to do something, I can. But I don't want to be pushed into it.
Gene, I have a show on bicycle racing, and just before I came over here, I recorded a show with 4 women from Ireland.
Oh boy.
Who are going to race around Ireland. And we got to chatting about this. You know what? In the world of ultra cycling, which I'm involved in, women are beating men on a regular basis.
Of course. You don't think that's going to surprise me, do you?
No, but...
Hey, go up here in the dining room. The people that go to hell first are men. Seriously, we sit and look at them. I like men. I've married twice, but after 50, there isn't a whole lot of use for them.
There's one more story I want you to get in. The last time you flew.
Well, yeah, I was at Oshkosh, which is a national convention, and I asked this guy. I wanted to go up in a seaplane because I'd never been in one. He had a CB, real cute little thing, and he said, "I'll take you up." He was an airline pilot, so we go to the seaplane base, and he's sitting in the pilot's seat, 3 airline pilots were in the back seat. All three of them had flown for the airlines, and there's one seat open, and it's over here in the front. And I said, I'm not going to sit there. I said, my license isn't any good. I haven't flown for a long time. He said, I'm an instructor. I'll show you how once, and then you ought to be able to do it. Now, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me, because I will do it. Anyway, the lake was very calm. It was, let's see, what's that lake? Winnebago.
Lake Winnebago.
In Wisconsin. And we get up and he makes this landing, and he made two of them, I think. He said, okay, you do it. And I thought, what am I going to do? I have to do this. Man, I made the coolest landing you ever saw on that water. Just ease that right in. And I did that twice.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me again. And Jean, I have to thank you for your service to our country. And we're glad that you're a veteran now.
Yeah, I am.
But you know,
too.
the fight still hardly goes on, because it just recently they started to allow you WASP to be buried at
Oh yeah, there was another fight about
Arlington.
that. Now, I've been to 5 funerals there. Every time it's the same thing. And every time one of us died, and these were particularly women that lived in the area or were married to.
Yeah.
And one, they said, oh, of course, your husband's buried there. He was a major. You can be buried there. And she said, no, I want to be buried there on my own, under my own name. They said, well, you can't do that. So we fought that one down, and the trouble was her daughter was pretty influential. Her job with the things that she knew and the people that she knew, and it hit the Washington Post and was on the front page, which immediately got everybody into it. So we went to, that was the first one I went to, and there were 5 of us for honorary pallbearers. So she was buried next to her husband, but still under her own name. And then I went to 4 more, and then they came up again and said no. But there's another cemetery in the southern part of D.C. area. It was a Confederate cemetery, and my one friend's buried there.
Thanks a lot, Jean. Thank you for all you did, and for all those people that did that under such difficult circumstances.
Well, women have always shown up. Didn't Becky Thatcher show up with water?
Yep.
And I don't know, it's my country too.
Okay, thank you.
You are so welcome.
Well, thank you all for watching. When will there be another show? I don't know. It's just whenever something comes up. We don't have a schedule here. But again, we invite you to make some suggestions of persons you think have a story to tell, or maybe some interesting place that we could talk about here. If I don't get ideas, there won't be a show, so it's up to you. And if you get bored at night and can't get to sleep, I can help you get to sleep by going to my other show, thehighramshow.com, a show about cycling and ultracycling. Very, very niche sport, but we do have a worldwide audience, and we enjoy doing that quite a lot. Been doing that one for 5 years now. So, thank you for watching again, and we'll see you, well, whenever we get something to show. Bye-bye.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.